Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to ENTP Nurture. Today, I have someone very special. Welcome, Jeff Cooper. He's an ADHD coach. He has an amazing website which is called Dig Coaching Practice. Do check it out. He has podcast, he has blogs, podcast done with other people. Very interesting interviews in his YouTube channel as well. Very small videos with tips and tricks that probably helps you. I just wanted to bring him on and explore this side, his life as a coach, ADHD, and explore this concept of, everyone needs a personalized solution. It's not like this. There's no one solution that works for everybody.
Hmm.
And welcome, Jeff Cooper. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Point of reference, it's actually Copper. More people
Cooper?
get me Cooper than Copper because there's two O2Ps, but just don't feel bad about it. It happens all the time, but it's Jeff Copper.
No problem.
So thanks for having me on.
No problem, Jeff. So how did this start? You've been in this industry for a long time. So how did
Yeah,
you get into it?
I've been an attention coach since 2007. So and specializing in coaching adults with ADHD ever since the beginning. I coach everybody, really life coach training, but I definitely specialize in people with ADHD.
So how did you get into the specialization? Because back in
That, and
2007.
that's a really long story. Bottom line is I've had my own challenges in my life, and any success I've had was really done differently than what mainstream did. And I think in college, I finally let go of trying to do it the way I was told and did it the way I did it. And I had some success with that. When I got into coaching, um, there was a psychiatrist that was a friend of mine, child psychiatrist, that I went to breakfast with one time and started talking about life coaching. They said, you'd do really well if you worked with, adults with ADHD because you're real organized. And so I got started in it and been doing it ever since and just love it. So basically, most of what I'm coaching is helping people own the fact that their brain is different and own the fact that they are different and help them in a creative way find out what works for them. Um, One of my go-to things is if you're drowned in a sea of strategies, which is often happening, is you're reading the books as if you're like that person and they're not working because you're not that person. And you have to understand that in marketing, people want the answer. And so that's what you market, because people won't buy what
Yeah.
they need. They buy what they want, and they want the solution. And as I described, a really good tip or trick might work for 15% of the people. You'd think it works for almost everybody, but it really doesn't. That's why there's so many books in the self-help section of the bookstores, because if there was one solution, it'd just be one book. And most people lose sight of that. They're just looking for, just give me the answer. And so they spend years with this answer and that answer, the other answer that none of them works, because they never look at themselves and say, well, what works for me?
So you have coached many people, and all your success stories, all the system that you have implemented has been personalized. Is it? There's
Yes.
nothing. There's nothing that is like, okay, I'm gonna use the same system on you, on you, on you, on you. It doesn't work that
Well,
way.
there's the process of attention is the same for everybody. How individually how you pay attention is different. So, for example, people with ADHD struggle with working memory.
Mm-hmm.
Oversimplified, think of it like this: they have a hard time thinking in their head. So it's easier for them to think outside their head. There's two parts of working memory. One's visual imagery and the other one's self-talk. We call it the mind's voice, or at least Dr. Barkley does. So they have a tendency to need to externalize stuff, write stuff down, do pictures and stuff like that. And the other side of it is many people with ADHD, they talk a lot. They're told they talk too much and they suppress it. They're actually not talking. A lot of times they're actually thinking out loud. They don't know it, and the people around them doesn't know it. How they're talking out loud and what function varies among people, but talking out loud is how they pay attention to things, and like not to talk, not to think. So sometimes I'll bring that to their attention about,
Mm.
hey, this is working for you. And, that might be for 25 to 45% of the ADD population, that they're talking out loud or thinking out loud. Now, how they do it, what they do it, the way they do it, that's a little bit different. But sometimes that's not a tip, trick, or strategy. That's a realization of how you process stuff. And then within that, what they do, I coach them. So that's, again, making that distinction. That's just a understanding how you do it and what's going on. And then within that, in terms of managing it. That's as individual as the person is. Make sense?
Yeah, I really like how simple the way you speak is, because I've heard some people speak is too complicated, it's too much of jargon, you know.
Yeah.
I really love your style of delivery. All right. Hmm. So talk to me more about the different clients you have, because for me in my head, I don't know why I have this paradigm where I'm searching for a system that works for everyone. You know what I mean? But
Well, so excuse me, I'm sorry.
no problem.
Um, I, so to understand this a little bit, how people think differently, one of the things I do with my clients is to help them understand working memory. A thing that I regularly do is I explain to them, I'm going to tell them 5 words. And when I'm done, I want them to repeat them back to me in alphabetical order. It's like teacher, zebra, kangaroo, hippopotamus, and bumblebee. And what they'll do is they'll think about a minute and then they'll repeat them. And about half the time, the ADD crowd gets it wrong or they forget a word, which I don't really care about. But what I tell them, I said, you'll notice is that you had to load those words into your mind and then you had to hold them and pay attention to the words in some fashion
Yeah,
and reorder them without forgetting them.
yeah,
And I say, that's the process of working memory, or the process of thinking. And so that's ubiquitous for everybody. But the thing about it, what's fascinating to me is I've asked people, well, how did you remember those words? And one woman told me, well, I could hear your voice echoing in my head. Another woman said, I could envision a teacher with a bumblebee flying around her head, a zebra, kangaroo, and hippopotamus sitting in the chairs in the class.
mhm,
One woman said she could see them kind of in a marching across her mind in a kind of a movement. And I kind of said, really, is that vivid color? She said, no, it's actually black and white. And one guy one time told me that he remembered them based off of smell. So my point
mm,
really here is thinking and working memory is all the same, but how people think and how they remember that really varies. So you got one person who's very auditory, who hears the word, another person who's got a sensitive smell, they smell the word. And so when you begin to understand it like that, then you can begin to understand why not everything's the same. I am a person that learns. I need to have a bigger picture understanding of a concept before I can uh, address the details. As I described, if I was going to do a jigsaw puzzle, I have to see the picture, what the puzzle's supposed to look like at the end before I can put the pieces together.
mhm,
Other people, they're better at taking the details and forming the picture. Like my mother, in fact, we're the complete opposite.
huh,
If I'm going to show her something on the computer, I want to explain conceptually how the computer works. She doesn't want that. She just wants the rote steps. And over a period of time, she works the other direction. So we have learning modalities or processes that are complete opposite of each other. And so hence what would work for her or me are two completely different things. And so just try to illustrate that everybody's brain is a little bit different. We all think, we all process stuff a little bit differently. And when I'm helping people, the trick really is self-observation, is to watch yourself, as opposed to, you can read the books and get the education, and sometimes it'll help, but often I'll be coaching somebody and I'll forbid them from reading anything else because I need them to observe themselves, not try to
mhm.
be like the book. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, so what you're telling is the key factor to change is becoming more aware of your actions and more aware of your thoughts that's leading to the
Yep.
actions, or the emotions that's leading to the thoughts leading to the
Yep.
actions, and through that you will get to understand how or what to change. Is it?
So another simple description, it's very common. You ask people, I can only get things done at a deadline. And I
Yeah.
go, well, if you think about it, however you do it at the deadline is usually the most efficient way of doing it, because you're under a deadline. I mean, you have to go to what's most efficient. When you think about it, water runs downhill because it's the path of least resistance. And if you're up at a time crunch, you'll have a tendency to do it in the most efficient method. And so I do a lot of, okay, so there was a deadline. Well, what did you do? Let's talk about the step-by-step process, because if we can just watch yourself, then that's your system. And so I tell you a story, because sometimes people's systems are a little not quite what they think of it. I was coaching a guy one time and he was very verbal. He talked out loud all the time. And one day he said, oh my God, I I had a big project and we didn't get it done. One for the deadline, we wouldn't get it done. And I said, well, what do you mean you wouldn't get it done? What'd you do? He said, well, I grabbed my team and brought them into a conference room. And I said, really? You had about 15 people on his team. And I said, yeah. He said, we were in there all afternoon and part of the evening. And I said, I bet you did all the talking. And he said, well, I'm the leader. Like, I know, but you were talking out loud and they were just there to give you some information. And it took him a little while. He's struggling with that. And he finally goes, well, yeah, I guess you're right, but I can't have a meeting. I can't just bring 15 people in a meeting every time I need to think out loud. I said, well, yeah, you can. You've been doing it your entire life. He's like, no, I don't. I said, yeah, you do it at every deadline. So in a sense, the deadline was the justification to bring everybody into the room. And I said, so it's not the deadline. It's in your mind, not consciously, just subconsciously. You do what's the most efficient. All you have to do is do it 3 days in advance. And he said, but I can't do that. And I remember I called it his PFC meeting, which is prefrontal cortex meeting, which is basically his thinking meeting. He came up with some other, I don't know, public something or other that was really kind of cool. That was a very salesy type thing. It was basically him thinking out loud, but it didn't sound like it. But my point really, premise, is that these are the things that people don't do. Is if you observe yourself in like those situations, all the clues to what worked for you are in your successes. And if you study your successes, then that's actually how you can build systems and really manage yourself. Make sense?
Yeah, so study your successes makes a lot of sense. I feel I I sometimes give I give more value to something that is not doesn't serve me. You know what I mean? Sometimes I give more value to watching a YouTube video rather than doing my project. You know, and
Yeah.
so and this the issue with like productivity. I feel with productivity is just a misplacement of values, and what productivity is more like I should be doing this when I'm doing this. Help, you know.
Well, so you now you're having an emotional judgment because you're judging your values. You're not looking at why you're doing something, why you're not. So what I find is the root of procrastination, like 75% of the time, is ambiguity, or
Mm-hmm.
you either don't know what to do, you don't know how to do it, you don't know where something is, you don't know how long it's take, or that's literally you don't really know how to do it. The other, I don't know how to do it, is conceptually you can't see it all in your working memory. You can't use visual imagery to put it together. They're very different forms of ambiguity. You don't really know, but you get you to the same end. And the point really is that people will shame themselves for not getting things done. They'll call themselves name. I'm a perfectionist, or I'm a procrastinator, or whatever. And when you think about it, name calling doesn't really solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
You usually have to stop and address and say, what is it I'm not really clear about? And then you have to move forward with that. And I find a lot of people, particularly in our world today, we're becoming a society that's focused on convenience as being productive. And it's actually not when you think about it. So to explain this, if it's 10 o'clock at night and you might, hey, listen, I want to do some work. It's convenient for you to send an email to somebody about a topic. Maybe it's kind of complicated because you have the time. And they get the email and then they reply to you and you reply to them. And you think about, sometimes those conversations can span a week. Well, every time you get that email, you have to reload in your mind what the conversation is about. And that reloading process is what I call the rebooting process of working memory. It's effortful, it's time consuming, and sometimes it's hard.
Yeah.
And it's inefficient because if you're having to load up your mind and transition, you spend all your time doing that. Whereas if you just wait the next day and get on a telephone, conversations are very efficient sometimes if you're trying to learn, because there's a lot of nonverbal communication and you have a conversation and you get it done and you move on. So people will opt for convenience as if it's productive, when at the end of the day, you end up doing more work. You just get to do it when you want to, and it's less productive. So let's go back to productivity. There's a lot of times you're sitting there and there's something that's you're ambiguous on, and you're not picking up the phone, you're not having a meeting, you're not resolving that because you feel like you should just sit there and do it on your own. And since you don't know, you end up doing something else that you're clear on or is more fun to feel like you're productive. So let me go back to where you started. It's a values thing. Well, that's a judgment that you're making of yourself. You're not really analyzing what's at issue with the productivity. Like, I don't really know what's going on. Okay, that's
No,
great.
no,
What do I
absolutely.
do? I need to get on a phone, or I need to get on a call. I need to get with somebody to work my way through this. Instead, there's a judgment that you should just be able to do it on your own. And so again, you don't know what you to do. So you go rearrange your sock drawer to feel like you were productive, or you escape to YouTube, and then you start to shame yourself. So anyway, this goes back to self-observation that we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
and getting to the root of what's the core. Like, the internet's going to sell you chunk it down, or do sprints, or just do it. Those are all emotional responses that don't address the core issue. So hopefully this is making some sense.
Yeah, what has helped me is also self-observation and observing what I do, because I feel once I become aware of it, and this is the theory I want to talk about in my future video. I feel every habit is just something that you're doing unconsciously. Once you're conscious of it, you're almost out of the habit.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like you're in the forest, all you see is trees, but the moment you see the forest, for you to see the forest, you need to be outside the forest, right? So similarly, for you to like see the action, you're outside the action, not still strapped in the action. And now you get this choice that you can choose, and more
So
clarity, as you said.
I was shuffling some papers because I actually have a quote handy.
Nice.
Self-awareness is a foundational tool. It's a solid predictor of success in life by virtue of self-restraint. And so the ability to step out of yourself and look back at yourself and watch your behavior and gain self-awareness, again, is a very, very big predictor in your success in life. And so
Really.
so this notion of stepping out and watching yourself and accepting yourself. So I have dyslexia.
Mhm.
I gave up trying to spell years ago. Most people don't understand dyslexia. It's a coding and encoding problem. They think you're switching letters. It's not. When I look at a B, I retrieve a D.
Mhm.
So when I'm reading something and it says there's the word boy, I'll read the word doy. Well, you get to the end of the sentence, it doesn't make any sense. So I got to go back and reread it. So it makes comprehension really difficult. Understanding that, in college, I quit trying to do that stuff. I just learned to skim the first line of each paragraph and go to class and listen for the gist of things, what's behind the words. So I no longer tried to overcome my dyslexia. I basically said, I got to work with it and do it a different way.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times that self-awareness that I am this way, or it is what it is helped me move forward. And
Mhm.
my world, people with ADHD, they struggle with really repetitive, boring, routine tasks. And I
Mhm.
can't tell you how many of them will come up with a system that they got to do something that's really repetitive and boring every day. And I'll ask them, tell me one thing that you've ever done in your entire life that was repetitive and boring that you did every day for more than 6 months. And they'll go, well, I guess it's never happened. I go, well, great. Well, why do you think it's going to happen now? And they're like, what? Like, it's never happened in 4 decades. You don't have the self-awareness. Why are you setting yourself up for failure? In the moment you say, okay, well, what's the goal? I'm going to do it a different way. How would I do it? That self-awareness now has you on a path where you can actually come up with a solution that might work for you.
Mhm.
Whereas the lack of that self-awareness is you just kind of keep running into the same dead end over and over
Mhm.
and over. So I go back to the quote, self-awareness is a solid predictor of success. The ability to be self-aware, accept yourself, and manage yourself
Mhm.
is huge. And Dr. Russell Barkley, I'm a big fan of his. And, I was interviewing him one time. He said, you and I, most of our job is convincing people to own their
Mhm.
issue, because most people don't really want to own it. They want to act like it's not there. And that's why
Yeah,
they kind of go in circles.
which is what I wanted to ask you, because I do coaching thing as well, and for me, self-awareness part is there, and for them to get more productive, there's this middle step of acceptance, which I'm super big on. But however, that's not a process of understanding, but rather a process of realizing. You know what I mean? And you can understand what's going, because I understood what's going on, but for me to like realize, oh, I am doing this, it took time where I had to like sit alone, look back through my memories, and then see the pattern for myself, and connecting the dots for myself, you know.
Well, it's hard to step out of yourself because, number one, it's easy for society if you do it their way. And so they're
Mhm.
going to sell you on their way. By the way, this is a metaphor. The idea really is
Yeah.
that self-awareness, that realization is kind of, again, to your point, you got to step outside yourself and you got to look back at yourself and look at what is, and you got to look at observation. And I'm going to go back to going green in a second, but
Go for it.
observation is like one of those things where you have to sit there and you have to look at things without emotion. For example, I get a lot of phone calls from parents or spouses saying their ADD person's not motivated. And I'm
Mhm.
like, you're think about this. What is motivation? And basically in their mind, motivation is you should do what I want you to do. Like I want my
Mhm.
kid to do his homework, and he's not motivated. No, he's playing Xbox. Isn't it clear? He's motivated to play Xbox. It's obvious. Can't you see it? He's motivated. He's like, his issue, he's like, just because he's not doing homework doesn't mean he's not motivated. He's just more motivated to
Exactly.
play Xbox. And until
Yeah.
you acknowledge that he's motivated to play Xbox, you're shaming him. You're not doing anything to solve the problem. I mean, you're just spinning your wheels. But we talk as motivation as something that you're supposed to do or we want to do, not what we
Mhm.
actually do. That is, we're conditioned to believe things and look at things a certain way. And you got to step out of it. And don't get me wrong, Prem, this is kind of hard, but
No.
part of
Oh,
that realization is you step out, you see things for what they are. So
yeah.
in the world today, for me, I like bills to come in the mail. And the reason I like bills is they come to the mail. I don't have to go get them. They come to me. And
Mhm.
I open an envelope and I can see my balance right there. And even if I don't do anything with it, I kind of am aware of what my bank balance is. Once a month when I open, I see it. For me, it comes in, I put it in a pile, and then I log on to one website and I pay them all. I like that. It's convenient. I don't have to, it all comes to me. It's all a reminder. It's just a process. I'm passive in it and it works. But the banks, they want me to go online. They want me to go paperless. What happens then is I get an email saying I got a statement. Now I got to go click on it and I got to go find my username and password, which I don't know about you, but I got 50,000 of those and I can never remember it. That's a pain in the butt. Then I get on the website. Then I got to go find the statement. They're never very intuitive. And
Mhm.
then for me, I got to download this. I got to print it anyway because I log it into kind of Quicken. But you see all the steps that are associated with that,
Mhm.
and I can never remember my login name and number. And so anyway,
Yeah.
it's unproductive for me to do that. I have a system. It's flawless. It's like mindless. It's a piece of cake for me. They are bullying me. You should go green. I get 50,000 like, hey, you can go paperless. You don't think I know that? Like, I've known that for like the last 6 years. Quit asking me.
Yeah.
But my point is they're bullying me and they're trying to get me to believe that I need to go paperless. It's convenient for them, but it's not very convenient for me. So selfishly, they're shaming me and bullying me to do that. And so the realization sometimes is that work has to be done. They're just trying to get out of it and they're trying to make you feel guilty for not doing it. And that realization where you step out of it, go, oh, wow, I own myself. And you can sit there and I'm like, I'm,
Mhm.
I'm happy to go toe to toe, like
Yeah.
paper. If this is all about you, it's not about me. And again, my point really is going back to is that realization sometimes is stepping out objectively and looking at the facts, not the
Mhm.
emotions, and then dealing with it. So emotionally, society wants me to do it their way because it's easy. Emotionally, um, they want me to be like them. Well, I work differently. This is what I have. This is what motivation is. The more you can step out of yourself and look back at yourself
Mhm.
and see yourself for what you are, you're much better positioned to manage yourself
Mhm.
productively. It goes back to the quote, self-awareness is a solid predictor of success.
Yeah. I I only recently understood what motivation is, which is also I was about to like make a future videos about this. For me, the way I define motivation is you always choose something what you perceive to be what you perceive to give you pleasure or what you perceive to be taking you away from pain. That's it. And this word perceive is super important. And people think, oh, I have to know what I need. This definition of perceive, I don't know it. I have to be self-aware. No, if I just look at my actions, the choices I make tell me what I perceive to be more pleasurable and than this. You know what I mean?
Yep.
when I look at my dreams, the choices I make in my dreams kind of tell me what kind of person I am and what value, what I perceive to be more pleasurable or going away from pain. Or the movies I play in my head, I kind of use that as a to triangulate. Okay,
Hmm.
this is what I put. This is what I perceive to be more pleasurable, and that's why I keep choosing this. Now I have to like do the self-reflection part and observe.
Yep.
Okay, why am I doing this? And something that's super important. We are going quite back here, which is you said it takes a lot of work to like bring in information and play with it with the working memory. For example, if I have to sit down and if I have to recollect or contemplate, let's say an incident that happened to me, my coworker told me this way, or the mail's coming this way and they're pulling me to do this. I feel you. So now, and I'm sitting here, and for me to process it, I'm realizing how much effort and energy it takes for me physically.
Yep.
And talk to me more about that. Why is that? What is that exactly? Because I feel
Oh,
emotionally and energetically drained as well by the end of
well, let's
the.
just do something real quickly. I want you right now. I'm gonna give you a simple thing, and I'll give you a couple minutes and see what you come up with.
Sure.
So, in your head, what's
uh,
3 to the power of 5?
3 power 5. Oh my god, it's 9. 9 threes are 20. 9 threes are 27. 7. 7 3 sevens 21 5 50. I'm like 3 power 5, right? Couple of minutes. Okay, so if I've reached to like 3, 9, 27, and then from 27, oh, why am I doing that? So it's like 9 times 9, which is 81. So 81 into 3, 3, 3, 8, 3 are 24, 243.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, here's what I want you to know. Was that easy?
Well, once I figured out the second part, it was easy because I was trying to do like 3 times
No,
3
no, no,
and
no, no, no. In totality, was that easy to do?
uh, dep- uh, I
Was
would
it
say
fun?
moderate.
Was it
Was it?
fun?
Mm, me realizing that I could have done it the other way was kind of fun. I'm gonna lie.
Well, in that experience, right? You had to load it in your mind, and you had to play with that information in your mind, right?
Uh-huh.
You see how effortful that was.
Yeah.
Um, it was effortful, and it took you what, like a minute, right?
Yeah.
Um, be much more fun if you could go do something fun as opposed to that. But thinking is really effortful. Now with you earlier, I had talked about working memory, right?
Yeah.
And did you notice that you were talking out loud when you did that? That actually made it easier for you. If I would have said not to say anything, I think you would have had more, you might have gotten the answer, but it would have been more difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then
Yeah.
imagine if I would have said 3 to the power of 6.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the point.
Yeah.
Thinking is effortful.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're thinking and you don't know if there's an answer or a solution. Sometimes thinking you can't hold it all in your mind. So it's like, do you really want to go outside and do gardening when it's 150 degrees? No, I want to go inside the air conditioning. And so when you're sitting there and you're taking a look at some things, heavy thinking for people, particularly with ADHD, is they always want to escape it, and because they'd rather go do, like, rather watch YouTube videos or something, and it's effortful. So going back to your point, is it's not pleasurable to think. Um, that was just a simple 3 to the power of 5. Doing your taxes is like horrible for most
Yeah.
people. And so what do? You go to whatever feels good. But I work with the ADD crowd, and they have a reward driven brain. And that is that, oversimplified, they get dopamine, they pay attention to it. They don't, they don't. And so if you're self-aware and you understand that that's what your brain is, then your issue is okay, how do I make an exercise more pleasurable, right? Make
Wow.
it easier.
Yeah.
And so in the situation that we just described, where the 3 to the power of 5 is with my ADD crowd, it's hard for them to think inside their head. It would be easier if they wrote it down on a piece of paper, 3 times 3, da, da, da. It's not nearly as effortful. So that thinking then is easier. There's a higher probability that it might do it. So it's like gardening outside when it's 80 degrees, not 150 degrees.
Mm.
If you were to do that in the company of somebody else, that might make it even easier, particularly if there's a girlfriend that you have that you're attracted to. Now, all of a sudden, this effortful thing became something that you're interested in. because you're there with a pretty girl. So
Yeah.
that's self-awareness and that's self-management. And as I talk about people, if productivity is about managing the environment to manage your brain, if you make those adjustments, it's there. I haven't really
Yeah.
seen many people successfully manage the world using willpower day in and day out. And if they
No.
are, they're usually exhausted
Mm.
and burnt out by the time they're 35 or 40.
What you said was so interesting for me. That one sentence that you said, which was, "Oh, if something gives me dopamine, I pay attention. If it doesn't, I just don't pay attention." And I'm like noticing that pattern. I'm thinking about it right now. I'm like, huh, that's interesting. So I'm just okay, huh, because I feel that's a very important pattern that I can use in my life too, where I feel like if something is not giving me enough dopamine, I'm like, you know what, there's something else that does give me dopamine. Why am I doing this? It just doesn't make
So
sense. Yeah,
yeah, hold on for just a second.
sure.
Dopamine is the reward neurotransmitters,
Hmm.
pleasure neurotransmitter. It's very important in human development. It's the reason we procreate. Orgasm is just a release of dopamine. It's the reason we forage for food. It feels good. So
Hmm.
self-awareness sometimes is I'll have clients and I say, this is just a brain. And this is like Pavlov's dog, right? And if there's a lever, it's going to go push the lever. If there's no dopamine, it's going to find another lever and another lever. But when it finds the lever with dopamine, its issue is it won't stop. It'll just keep kind of
Hmm.
hitting the lever. And so, recently I put out a YouTube video about YouTube. For people with ADHD, they're reward-driven brain, they're dopamine-driven brain, and YouTube's the second most popular search engine on the planet. And YouTube's got an algorithm. They know what you're interested in and they're going to serve it up. There's a great documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma, because they're basically trying to get you addicted to the material so that you watch more ads so that they can make more money. And so the idea is they've cracked the code on the primitive brain and they're controlling you. That's why people get on YouTube and 4 or 5 hours later, like they're lost in it. It's because this little thing, this little reptile, if you will, is chasing that stuff. And that's self-awareness, to be able to recognize that and say, listen, I can't help myself. I either don't go onto YouTube or I put blockers and stuff on it. And there's a lot of people who want to act like they can manage themselves or they can have their cake and eat it too. And some can, but in my crowd, I've got a lot of people with screen addiction problems right now, and they need to go to a flip phone, but they won't because they don't want to give it up. So going back to your point, as I describe to people, dopamine is the core of everything. Anything you're
Hmm.
passionate or interested in really goes back to where you get your dopamine from. In my ADD crowd, because it's a search for dopamine, it's a self-regulation.
Hmm.
Impulsivity is really self-regulation because you're trying to find dopamine. Impulsivity,
Yeah.
the same thing. So we've got all these terms and all this stuff out there that's just confusing to everybody. At the end of the day, our brains are reward-driven brains.
Yeah.
My crowd, my ADHD crowd, is even more reward-driven, and society wants them just to try harder because it's easier for them
Yeah.
if you just try harder. So they
I think
make
everything in society is designed to keep rewarding that dopamine, the reptile brain. There's nothing in the society that's explicitly designed to get away from it. I
well,
feel.
there's an incentive.
Yeah.
The companies are rewarded for it. Like, again, not
Yeah.
to pick on YouTube or Google, but they're people. It's like my father worked on the space program
Hmm.
in Texas. I
Wow.
remember he worked on Mercury, Gemini, Apollo 9, 10, 11, 12. And by time 13 started, nobody had any interest until 13 had a problem. By the time we got to like 14 and 15, the equivalent of people were more interested in what Paris Hilton had for lunch when she was in prison than a man on the moon, because it wasn't as sexy. And so
Yeah.
our world today is selling to the emotion. Even my son graduated from college. He's a consultant in Atlanta, and they
Nice.
spend more time on the presentation and the graphics of the information than the quality of the information. It's really
Mm.
more of a show than it is the quality of the content that they're delivering, because they're selling to everybody's emotional brain. So part of self-awareness is to realize that those people in the commercials, they're not the real people. or even if you do this, if you read a lot of, if you know how to read book reviews, because I get asked to write a lot of book reviews and I don't have time to read them all. If you read the book review, if you really listen to them, you can tell if the person read it. Like if I'm writing a review on somebody, I'll say, this person's a real thought leader.
Yeah.
I'm not commenting on the book. I'm not, because I didn't read the book. I'm commenting on the person. And a lot of that stuff is all contrived because everybody wants that type of stuff. Now, best-selling books and some of the stuff's out there. But anyway, this is the level of self-awareness that people aren't aware of. They just go on about the business and they don't actually stop and think about all the what's there. So again, we're going back to self-awareness, your brain, what works for you. Focus in on that, and you'll find productivity there. Reading all the books to be like what they want you to be like, you'll find a lot of anxiety in
that. So let's end this call. We have like 15 more minutes or 20 more minutes. So let's end it with, so how have you helped? So can you like give me some of the stories where the client came with a problem and how did you make something non-rewarding reward, So how did you create, I feel that's where creativity comes in.
So real simple things. I'll go to the pandemic. I'll tell you, this is one for me. I went to school on a swimming scholarship, so I'm pretty active. And when COVID hit and we got locked down, all the pools were closed. I wasn't able to exercise, and exercise is real important. Walking is really kind of boring to me, but it's really all I could do. And it's a repetitive, boring activity. And so in order to do that, what I did was business picked up for me, and I had a lot of friends that weren't working and they would call me. And so what I would do is I would try to the strategy is to add something that is fun to something that's boring and combine those two things. So I had some ear pods. So every afternoon when I got done with work, there's a 3-mile loop around a golf course where I live. So I would put on my earbuds, and my goal was to see how fast I could walk the loop. I can't run because I got some back problems. I used to run a lot. And I would return the phone calls of all the people who'd call me. And so I got down to 13.5-minute miles while I'm talking to people. So now I have a goal. I'm very competitive, and that was how fast can I do this per mile. But I was talking to my friends while I was doing it. So I was really focused on talking to my friends and walking fast, and 3 miles happened as a secondary activity.
Yes.
A lot of times when I'm coaching people on exercise, it's what are you going to do to stimulate your brain? Because exercise is a secondary activity. I've coached people before where they're struggling with doing the laundry. That's when you watch YouTube videos. You're encapsulated by that, but you can fold at the same time. Other examples are when when COVID hit, I had a couple of CEOs they're very verbal, and they just go in people's office and they just talk through problems. And they were now at home, and they're having conversations by email, which is very inefficient, as we kind of talked about earlier. And I'm like, you have to simulate the office environment. And they were like, what? I don't know. You have to simulate it. It's unproductive for you to have these conversations. And so my first one that had a problem was real simple. They just have Zoom up. All their direct reports have to be on Zoom all day. They can see their picture. They're not having a meeting. They're all on mute, but she can see them, and she's got something. She just pings them, and they take off mute and they have a conversation, not by email, but they actually have that conversation, and then they go back on mute, and then other people are doing that at the same time. And so that's not a tip, trick, or strategy. That's the talking out loud that I said that helps you think, like you did on the 3 to the power of 5. That helped. Other things I've helped people with. There was a woman one time that she's clearly very visual, like very, very visual. I do an intake when I first meet people. At the end of the first thing, it's not really a coaching thing, but she said, I need some help with my to-do list. And I didn't really coach. I just flippantly like, okay, you haven't probably yet. I said, well, why don't you, what would it be like if you drew a picture of a to-do? Don't really know why I said it, but anyway. A week later, she comes back. She goes, oh my God, that was incredible. I'm like, really? Why? Now, this is self-awareness. She goes, I never really realized it, but a letter is a symbol. And when I add the letters into a word, that's a symbol. When I add words together in a sentence, I build a picture in my mind of what it is. And I go and, I assemble this picture. Then I got ADD. I get distracted. I forget the picture. I got to come back. I got to reassemble the picture. And she says, that's a lot of work. I wouldn't do it. So like earlier, it was a lot of work for you to calculate 3 to the 5th power. If you have to do that all the time, you just don't do it. She said, when I draw the picture, I don't have to assemble the picture. I just look at it and there's an association.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's funny because I use that. And there's another guy I was coaching one time. He was talking, the binder had Bank of America. He'd have to sit there and like kind of envision it, look at the words and construct the visual image of it. It was a lot of work. And we printed out the logo of Bank of America and put it on the outside. It was a game changer because he didn't have to assemble the picture in his working memory to associate it. And so these are situations where that person had a picture-based to-do list as a regular to-do list. I've had one woman, she couldn't hold things in her working memory. And most of us, if we have a task list and you cross one off, that feels good. For her, visually, it was out of balance. It was like, it was anxiety driven. So I was talking to her and we came up with a to-do list, which was index cards. So she'd have index cards, and she'd categorize them. She'd take them and she'd spread them all out on the table. And when she did one, she just throw it in the trash so she could rearrange them, and she didn't have the anxiety of having it crossed off, but also she could categorize them into groups with rubber bands around them. And so she would have it in if one of them was like, oh, this is a chore, but here's a chore that I'm going to go out. She could move it into different groups and it worked for her. Another woman I coached one time, she had incredible, really sensitive to smell. I'm actually kind of proud of this one because I was curious about it. I don't know why. And she didn't ever come in and ask me for coaching on it, but I don't remember how we got into the conversation, but we started talking about smell and how she remembers things around the house if she smells stuff. And so anyway, over a period of time, we started experimenting with a smell-based to-do list, which is really out there. But what was interesting for me, because I was so curious, I never knew this, but crayons, if you buy the right ones, they actually have odor. So the woman got like a box of 164 crayons and she would associate a certain smell with a task. So can you imagine having a list of just a line that you just smell, and that smell apparently, I don't understand, it would like stick in her mind, and then she could remember to do that. And so I'm sharing these stories because they're a little outlandish, but I'm trying to illustrate how different brains work differently and how self-observation can help you find stuff that works for you.
Yeah, and I feel creativity is using the power of imagination to self-observe, accept, and then make changes, and then accepting this is how I am. So how can I use my imagination to fit me rather than fit a idealistic model that a society has created, and use that model and hope that model fits me. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I feel that's the game that we are all playing.
That's a mind shift too. That takes a period of time because most of us have the mindset that we're like each other and we've got to do everything. And the people that come to ADD world, there's a shift in how your mind is set up to think from you should do it a certain way to do it your way. And that some people never make that shift, but that's not something that happens overnight. That happens over a process. But almost anybody I've ever coached or that I know that's successful with a challenge like that, they let go of the shortcuts and they shift the mindset and they go, well, what works for me? As odd as that sounds, I'm going to do it that way. And I think it's a model, not just for my crowd, but just really everybody in general.
Yeah. We have 15 more minutes here. Talk to me about this concept of your experience and your interpretation of having an aha moment. That's really the biggest thing that I feel is so personal to everybody, and there's nothing that someone else can say you that will help you have that aha moment.
So an aha to me is the sudden comprehension that takes place when you look at something differently. So this is going to get kind of heady, but most people don't understand attention. So let's just do a fun attention exercise to see if we can illustrate it. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions here. Prem, what 2 days start with letter T?
Tuesday and Thursday.
What are you paying attention to?
The first letter of the thing.
You're paying attention to the days of the week.
Oh.
If you
Oh
pay
yeah.
attention to the days of the week, the answer is obvious. It's Tuesday, Thursday.
Uh-huh.
Tuesday, Thursday, and for our purposes in this conversation, is the object of attention. It's not what you're paying attention to. You're paying attention to the days of the week, and thus you get the answer Tuesday, Thursday. Okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Is there another answer to the question?
Could you repeat the question again?
What 2 days start with the letter T?
Today and tomorrow?
Correct. In order to do that, you have to pay attention to the past, the present, and the future. Yesterday,
That's so
today, and tomorrow.
interesting. Yeah.
So if you shift what you're paying attention to at what I call the level of attention, you'll get a different answer. That's an aha. Once you make that contextual shift, oh my God. So Prem, is there another answer to that question?
Tonight and
That's not a day.
it's not a day. I don't know.
How about the 3rd or the 10th, the 13th or the 20th? If you pay attention to a calendar, you get a whole plethora of stuff. So in this exercise, where I'm trying to illuminate is most people don't understand attention. You look at the object of attention as attention. It's not. It's what you look at that defines what it is. So an aha is a shift at the level of attention. A lot of people are stuck because they're trying to brainstorm and they keep thinking in terms of days of the week, and that's where they're stuck. So as an attention coach, I don't know what you should pay attention to. I just know that if you're stuck, you're paying attention to the wrong thing. And I work with people to kind of shift it. So now the question really is how do you have an aha? Well, by definition, it's a trial and error process. There's no methodical way to have an aha. You can go to people who get things like, I study attention, I study ahas, and I've done a few things here specifically with you, Prem, like the 3 to power 5 and that last exercise, so that maybe people unexpectedly are watching this, oh my God, I get it. Because sometimes ahas is you just stumble into something, or you go to people who think a certain way. But when you think of an aha, it is that shift at the level of attention, the calendar, the days of the week, or whatever, and they're invisible. They're not really conscious to a lot of people. And so when you start talking about creativity or out of the box or paradigm shifts or change of mindsets, you're shifting at that particular level. Now, and there's an aha, and then there's a mindset change. Those are two separate things. A bunch of ahas can lead to a shift of how your mind is set up to think, or you can change how your mind is set up to think, and then you have a bunch of ahas, but they're really two different things. A lot of people, when they're out on the internet, they're trying to find that aha, and sometimes you have to step out of yourself and watch yourself, because sometimes if you just keep searching for an aha, looking at the days of the week, you're really not going to find it. And the way you get ahas are a lot of times brainstorming and daydreaming and very unexpected places. The world is engineering brainstorming out of our world because you can't measure the productivity, but it's like everything. As I say, what's the value for the aha where we could replicate making fire, like as a human? Like, think about that. And you can't even put a price tag on it, but at some point in time, somebody figured that out. It was a huge aha. I can make fire at will. Just game changer. But a lot of times ahas, they're facilitated by collaboratively and talking to people and having associations, and we're losing the art of brainstorming these days. People are just like, where's the book that gives me the answer? So that's what an aha is. The issue is it's trial and error. So let's go back to see if I answered your question.
No, let me just rephrase what you just said. I think I understand it. What you're saying is and this is what I studied like in philosophy as well. There's content and there's context, right? And most of the stuff that we deal with, like what you said, give me the day of the week, what 2 days starts with T. My head, I took the word days and I went, oh, days of the week. So you gave me the content, and the context is something I put on top of the question.
Well, so in that situation, your brain took a shortcut. It didn't listen to the question. It made the assumption I said days of the week, which I didn't. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So your brain, it takes shortcuts. It skips. So in that situation, you didn't hear what I said. You heard what you wanted to hear, not what I actually said.
Yeah.
And that was, then you lacked onto that context. And then what I shared is if you look at other contexts, you get other answers.
Yeah.
And
So
you say context, there's, like I said, there's some people say context, some people say perspective, some people say interpretation. It's all the same thing. But
yeah. So it's really like rather than focusing on the content, you need to focus on the context and see what fixed way am I interpreting this, and how can I change my interpretation or perspective or context of it. And that's what you help people to do. You help people to give more options of context that they can choose from, right?
Yeah. So my simple thing is, if the obvious solution isn't working, you're probably paying attention to the wrong thing. Which takes us back to the beginning of it. If you're out there and you're reading a self-help book and it's not working, then you're paying attention to the wrong thing. Maybe you should be paying attention to yourself, because you're not like the person in the book. Because if you have a heightened sensitivity to smell and you're reading a book about somebody talking about an auditory answer, it ain't going to work because you're paying attention to the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm. I love how you brought this entire thing full circle, Jeff, not only in this topic, but also in the beginning of the interview. I loved having this conversation with you. If people really did watch this entire interview, they'll have a lot of aha moments, Yeah.
Hopefully.
They will, trust me. Thank you for coming and giving me an opportunity to be here, even though there are a lot of problems, you really been really kind. Yeah.
Thanks for having me on. Hopefully people get something from it.
Thank you very much. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.
Bye-bye.